UFC Qatar goes down this weekend, man, and I gotta say, this is one of the best fight nights I feel like the UFC has ever put together. Super excited for this card, and really, when we talk about the main event, we have two outstanding fighters. We have Arman Tsarukyan, who I've been up here singing the praises of. I've been saying outside of Islam Makhachev, and now that we have Ilia Topuria in the weight class, Arman Tsarukyan is the best lightweight on the planet. Now that Islam's moved up to welterweight, he is clearly the next best guy outside of Ilia Topuria. Clearly, it's those two. And I've been saying that they're on a different level than everybody else. We know that Arman has not fought since UFC 300, right? Pulls out of the title fight against Islam Makhachev at UFC 311. Dana White's like, there ain't no way we're giving him a title shot basically off of that, right? He's going to have to do something, right? Weighed in as the backup at 317. And now we're in this position where he is essentially in a title elimination bout against Dan the Hangman Hooker, a.k.a. Tattoo Dan. Psycho Dan, if you will. I'm very intrigued by this main event, man. I'm very intrigued by this main event, but we have a problem. And the problem is I've been trying to figure out how I can kind of make a case for Dan Hooker in this fight. Sure, Dan Hooker could land a knee, play the game from range, and turn this into some sort of war. And we get to see Arman really get tested in terms of, getting into some sort of brawl, this back and forth scrapping, something that we necessarily haven't seen so much from Arman Tsarukyan in his career. But then I go back and watch the tape, man. And we just got to be real about this fight and the situation. And the expectation for this fight should be Arman Tsarukyan going out there and completely dominating Dan Hooker and getting a finish at some point in this fight, man. Arman Tsarukyan is in the prime of his career. He is an elite fighter. And he is the only challenge in the lightweight division for Ilia. That's reality, and that's the fight that I want to see. I want to see Ilia versus Arman Tsarukyan, and I think that we're going to get it. I think Arman Tsarukyan goes out there, butchers Dan Hooker within the first couple rounds, calls out Ilia Topuria. I feel like that's part of the reason that the UFC has not booked Ilia Topuria just yet. I think they're waiting to see what happens in this fight, man. I think that they were waiting at UFC 322 to see what went down between Islam and JDM, and now what we have going on in Qatar. It just feels like it is going to be Arman Tsarukyan going out there, getting back in the win column because, Dana was like, look, you weighed in as the backup at 317, but given how you pulled out of that fight, it was a title fight, right? Against Islam Makhachev, we're not just going to throw you back in there. And from the business angle, like a lot of us understand that, but by the same token, we all know that Arman is the guy, man. He's absolutely the guy, and I feel like so many people have kind of forgotten because Arman hasn't fought in a while. We have not seen him since UFC 300 against Charles Oliveira. He's been out there doing grappling matches and all these kinds of things. He was a part of Khamzat Chimaev's camp for, a good bit of it for 319. I just feel like it's going to be this new monster unleash, man. And I've said two fights recently that we've had. Khamzat versus DDP, Islam versus JDM, to where I said in those videos, it just feels like after we saw those fights, people are going to be saying, who the hell's beating Khamzat? Who the hell's beating Islam? And that is exactly where we are right now. I'm not saying that Arman Tsarukyan is Khamzat or Islam Makhachev, but I believe that Arman Tsarukyan is damn good. I believe that he is going to go out there and brutalize Dan Hooker within the first couple rounds. And maybe Dan Hooker does turn this into a grit fest. Maybe he is able to stop the takedown, scramble back to his feet, turn this into some sort of war, because when we talk about Dan Hooker, we know what we're getting, right? Dan Hooker is one of those guys where it's like, it's your favorite fighter's favorite fighter. He's going to show up. He fancies himself a scrap. Dan Hooker's never in a boring fight. You put him in there with Gamrot. Gamrot couldn't control him, right? Hooker's getting back to his feet, landing good shots, and every fight with Dan Hooker is chaos, man. It always is. Right, one of my favorite fights of all time was Dan Hooker versus Dustin Poirier at the Apex. Right, that's just one I just turn on randomly sometimes, right, just to watch some violence, man. An amazing fight. You can't fight Arman that way, which I guess is kind of the way you kind of have to fight him, because Dan Hooker's outmatched on the ground, outmatched when it comes to the power, outmatched with the explosiveness and the overall athleticism of Arman Tsarukyan. So maybe that is his best path to victory. Try to land the knee as Arman closes the distance. Try to stay, at range. Try to turn this into one of those barn burners that maybe Arman isn't super familiar with. But this just feels like a real long shot for Dan Hooker, man. It just really does. And, you watch Dan fight, and one of the big critiques that I've had for Dan Hooker throughout his career is, he's this big, long, rangy guy in the lightweight division. But the problem is he does not use his range well. We see him at times, he's on the outside, moving around, feinting, putting the jab in your face. We'll see the right hand, he'll feint the knee to deter the takedowns, smash leg kicks from the outside. But once Dan Hooker gets tagged, he's one of those guys that he just sees red, dog. He just sees red, bites down on the mouthpiece, gets into the pocket, tucks his chin, and just goes after it, which makes Dan Hooker very exciting. But I feel like that's a disaster against Arman Tsarukyan, because if Arman's able to tag Dan Hooker on the feet, I really believe that he can crack the chin of Dan Hooker. I know that sounds crazy because Dan Hooker's chin he's incredibly durable. He's been in an insane amount of barn burners, but that's kind of the problem. Got a lot of miles on him. Right? We've seen Dan Hooker struggle with guys on the ground, and now he's going in there outside of the grapplers that Dan Hooker has fought in his career, right? The most dominant one, by far, Islam Makhachev, we all know that, got taken down and submitted very, very easily. And the thing to me, that differentiates a fight like Islam and a fight like Arman for Dan Hooker is, yes, Islam is more of a submission threat of Arman Tsarukyan, but there's a different element that Arman brings that these other grapplers don't, and it is monstrous, vicious, ferocious ground and pound that is rated R, man. It is rated R. Arman Tsarukyan, when he takes guys down, he turns into Freddy Krueger. He just does, man. He starts slashing people on the ground. Did you see what he did to Joe Alvarez? And look how good Joe Alvarez is, man. He's a dang good fighter, a guy that's now in the welterweight division, who's a crazy finisher, fast starter, super dangerous. Right? Dan Hooker is more technical than a guy, like a Joe Alvarez, I would say. But Joe Alvarez, to me, he hits harder than someone like Dan Hooker. Right? Dan Hooker's more sophisticated on the feet, right? Trains over at CKB. I'm sure that they're going to have some sort of game plan coming into this. But this is Tattoo Dan we're talking about, man. This is Psycho Dan, the guy that's just going to go out there, right? He might be fighting a very smart fight early on, landing kicks from range, popping and poking, playing this perfect kind of style to where it's not going to be long before Arman lands a big shot. Dan Hooker tucks his chin, bites down, starts slugging, and then Arman's just going to level change, take him down, and when you are underneath Arman Tsarukyan, it's not Mateusz Gamrot. It's not Gamrot. It's not like we're going to be having these little wrestling scrambles, and I'm just going to get controlled, so I'm just going to get back to my feet. There's really nothing to worry about here. There's no power on the feet. There's no submission threat. There's no ground and pound. Arman Tsarukyan is elite, man. He's elite in all categories. On the feet, explosive, fast, in the prime of his career. His striking has gotten even better. Right, I saw in those vlogs leading up to 319 with Chimaev, he was working with a boxing coach. His hands look sharp. He looks clean. He's in phenomenal shape. Right, the kicks are nasty. You saw what he did to Dariush, man. The knee up the middle, the right hand behind it. And then the minute Dariush hit the canvas, the ferocious instinct to just drop hammers on Beneil Dariush. Now, I get it. Oh, well, Dariush is getting, flicked by a jab and he's getting KO'd these days. I mean, I get that, right? Part of that's Dariush is like 65. But, I mean, come on, man. Dariush is still a really good fighter. It's just the issues he's had where he's a little bit chinny. We get that. But at the end of the day, like, Arman Tsarukyan is ferocious. And I know people are going to say, oh, well, it was a close fight against Charles Oliveira, but that's two Bronx. He's the most prolific finisher in the history of the sport. Right? Arman Tsarukyan was not afraid to go to the ground with Charles Oliveira. I get Charles was landing some shots on the feet, but so was Arman. Right? And again, that there's a different threat with a guy like Charles than there is with a guy like Dan. You don't have to really worry about Dan's ground game, right? We've seen he's capable on the floor, right? When he's in there against guys that aren't particularly good on the ground. We've seen Dan Hooker, show some solid ground skills with some good submissions. There's really no danger here for Arman Tsarukyan outside of Dan Hooker turning this into a barn burner, Arman fighting with some ego or something, and Dan Hooker landing a big knee. I'm sorry. I just don't see a path to victory for Dan Hooker in this fight. Well, I guess I do, other than, timing a knee on an entry, stopping the takedown, scrambling back to his feet, fighting from range, and really, implementing a smart strategy, which is just not something we see from Dan. It just isn't, man. And that's one of the reasons that everybody likes Dan Hooker. Right, because he's going to go out there, he fancies himself a scrap, he's going to bite down, slug it out, and he's going to be in those fight of the night type of candidates every single time, man. He's like a Gaethje. That's why I couldn't wait for, Hooker versus Gaethje. I mean, look at the Dan Hangman fights, man. Look against Jalen Turner. Destroyed his arm and still was hanging in there and made it the full 15 minutes and was able to win the fight. And he's riding a nice win streak. But again, come on, guys, who are those fighters? Claudio Puelles, one-dimensional as hell. Right? Can't strike for anything. Okay, goes out there with Turner. Very fun fight. Jalen Turner, big, long, rangy southpaw, difficult matchup striker. I get it. Fun fight. We knew what that was. Okay, so you beat Gamrot. Very competitive fight. And I actually was very impressed with Dan Hooker in that fight. Defending the takedown, scrambling back to his feet. We saw some improvements in the game of Dan Hooker. I'm not, this isn't to take anything away from Dan, man. We all like watching Dan Hooker fight. I'm just worried that people are going to look at this and go, yeah, it's an absolute banger. And look, it is a banger on paper. You see the name value. We know what Dan brings to the table. But unfortunately, at the end of the day, it's a matter of Dan Hooker's got miles on him. He's a guy that every time he's in there against that elite guy or that guy that can get him into a title shot or that top conversation in the weight class, he comes up short. He just comes up short, man. And we saw how easily Charles Oliveira disposed of a guy like Mateusz Gamrot. How easy was that? Right, and I get different styles make fights or whatever, but you see a guy like Arman, not afraid to grapple with Charles Oliveira, was putting some, nasty submissions, was able to escape, was able to stay safe. This just comes down to the fact that while Dan Hooker is fun, he's entertaining, it's a fight, anything can happen. He's got nasty knees, and with the right game plan, maybe he could come in and pull off some crazy upset here, which would be insane. I just don't think it's likely at all, man. I think Arman Tsarukyan, this just comes down to the fact that he's in the prime of his career, and make no mistake about it. I think Arman, he's got this chip on his shoulder, man. I feel like he's got this pissed off attitude, right? He's in here, Dan Hooker's been talking, right? It's going to kind of bring out that side of Arman to where Arman's like, listen, man, I got a title shot here, right? People are saying I should be fighting for the title, right? Remember, he's calling Ilya a duck, and we had those fun exchanges on social media. Arman is the guy to fight Ilia Topuria, man. That is the best fight in the lightweight division. By far, it's not even close. By far, it's not even close. What are you going to do? Throw Gaethje in there with Ilia? Ilia KOs him in the first round. Love Gaethje, too reckless. Can't be reckless. He's going to get knocked out. Paddy Pimblett, his striking, he looks like a scarecrow in there, right? And Paddy Pimblett, who's he beating? He's beating some old washed up guys, and I'm impressed with Pimblett's ground game. But come on, man, those aren't challenges to Ilia. I want to see Ilia challenged. The guy to do it is Arman Tsarukyan. Arman Tsarukyan's going to go out there. He knows what's at stake. He beats Dan Hooker, especially in impressive fashion. There is no denying him, man. The big thing was, I was even saying, just throw Arman in there with Ilia anyway. He's the number one guy. Now that Islam moved out of the weight class, that is the clear fight in the lightweight division, man. Arman Tsarukyan, him and Ilia Topuria are the best two fighters in this weight class, and nobody's beating either one of those guys outside of each other, right? Obviously, when they fight, someone's going to win there, but in terms of Arman Tsarukyan against Dan Hooker, this fight, it's just not close, man. I'm sorry. It's not close. I like Dan Hooker, tattoo Dan, man, dyeing his hair blonde. Every single fight that he in is very entertaining, and maybe early on he makes this, a scrap, right? Turns this into a grit fest, pulls Arman into his world and makes Arman forget, to shoot takedowns or something. That ain't going to happen, man. Arman's coming into this fight. He's not going to play around. He's got he's got great flexibility. Those kicks, shoots kicks up out of nowhere. Watch for the head kicks. Arman's dangerous, man. He's dangerous everywhere. Fast on the feet, nasty power in everything that he does. And the difference in this fight is the ground game, man. We have seen Dan struggle on the floor, and this is not a guy like Gamrot who's just going to control you. Arman has world-class control, man. He can keep you underneath of him, float from position to position, rain down nasty ground and pound. You turtle over, you give your back. Next thing you know, you are getting locked into submission. Arman Tsarukyan is a damn good grappler, man. Unbelievably dangerous. Those elbows, watch for him. I think Arman Tsarukyan is going to hurt Dan Hooker on the feet. I think he's going to take him down, and I think he's going to pull out the Freddy Krueger tactics and start to go to town with the elbows, the ground and pound. This is a nightmare matchup for Dan Hooker, man. It just really is. And I love watching Dan fight, right? We've seen him in there with some of the, the most entertaining guys, and I keep referencing that Poirier fight because it was that good. The Jalen Turner fight was excellent, man. It really was. But at the end of the day, Arman's in his prime. He's elite. He's a complete mixed martial artist. As fun as Dan Hooker is, maybe he does have the edge here on the feet, right? He's a guy that's got a striking background. We've seen Dan Hooker in there, and he can strike with the best of them, man. But at the end of the day, he does not maintain range well. And the minute he gets clubbed, he's like, I got to get one back. Then he wants to get into the pocket. He wants to turn it into this barn burner. Like I said, maybe, that can work for him in this fight because we see something uncharacteristic from Arman. I just don't see it, man. Arman knows what's at stake here. This is the biggest opportunity of his career, and I think that Arman goes out there with a point to prove, with a pissed-off attitude, and when this guy is in there, man, he is one of the most ferocious fighters, I think, in the UFC. The intentions behind the combinations, the intentions when the fight hits the floor, Arman is violent, man. Of course, he could go out there and just control Dan Hooker on the floor. You know, they could be going back and forth, and we could get this drawn-out decision, where this goes 25 minutes. I don't think so, man. I think Dan Hooker is in for a really hard night here. I think Arman Tsarukyan's going to hurt him on the feet. Got nasty power in his boxing. Watch for the kicks, the knees as well. Dan Hooker's got good knees as well. That's his best weapon. Arman's going to be very aware for that, man. He closes distance very well. He disguises his entries behind the striking. I think he takes Dan Hooker down, beats him up on the floor, and maybe, that opens up Dan Hooker for a submission. I think it's going to be the ground and pound, man. I think that this is going to look a lot like the Joe Alvarez fight. Arman's going to put a stamp on this one, man. And the next fight to make 100%, in my opinion, in the lightweight division, unless the UFC is going to go ahead and do Ilya versus Islam Makhachev in a super fight, Ilya versus Arman Tsarukyan, for me, in the lightweight division, that is by far the best fight that the UFC can put together. I think that we get it following UFC Qatar, man. I think Arman Tsarukyan is just that dang good, man. I think we're in for a fun fight while it lasts, but I don't know, man. I just think it's one-sided, man. I think it's one-sided, and I was looking at the tape. I'm like, maybe Hooker could do this, that, and at the end of the day, it's a fight. And I don't think Dan Hooker's going to have an answer for Arman's ground game, man. And again, it's different when guys are just taking you down and they're just holding you and you're working back to your feet, and you can explode off the ground. You can scramble the way you want because you're not worried. You got to be worried against Arman, man. The ground and pound, the submission game, and then on the feet, he's got ferocious power and explosiveness behind that, and his striking is constantly improving. I know he's been out for a little while. I'm expecting to see a new monster unleashed at UFC Qatar. I think Arman Tsarukyan is going to beat the brakes off Dan Hooker and get a finish within the first 2 rounds. But if you guys enjoyed this video, if you could do me a favor, please give it a like. Let me know what you think down in the comments. And if you're new, if you could please subscribe to the channel, I would greatly appreciate it. See you next time.